Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Okay, so let's move on to the third and final item, which is the announcement by Facebook that they were adding or aggregating or revealing new B2B targeting segments, some of which may not be entirely new. So David, what happened there?
Yeah, good segue in terms of former employers of David Mim. So my most immediate former employer, Demand Science, is more or less in this space. They do content syndication, largely targeting a lot of the job titles and sort of company types that Facebook's announcement pertains to. So they said that Facebook announced that you can now target IT decision makers. So people in IT based on job titles, business decision maker titles and interests, business decision makers in engineering or IT, operations, HR, strategy, or marketing. So I think those three things bundled together are sort of one piece of the announcement. And then the other piece of the announcement is new active businesses. So admins of engaged businesses created in the last 6, 12, or 24 months. So I think, to me, Facebook bundled these two things together, but I think they're pretty different in terms of who might want to be using them. And I think that we've talked numerous times, both privately and on this podcast, about the sort of the latent opportunity within Facebook for B2B marketing. I think that there's sort of this immediate gravitation towards, LinkedIn is the B2B social network, and if you want to target B2B, that's the network where you advertise. But in my experience, I don't necessarily think that's true, at least when you're talking about small to medium-sized businesses, that the folks involved in their decision-making suite don't necessarily turn off their business life when they're on Instagram or Facebook. It may be slightly more of an interruption, but generally speaking, that targeting these folks, as difficult as it may have been to find the right sort of combination of job title and industry and years of experience and income levels and all of that, there were some pretty granular settings in Facebook that already existed that should have theoretically allowed you to target these folks. But it feels to me like Facebook is now bundling this stuff up as sort of pre-baked segments that even the laziest marketer can easily, with one click, produce a campaign that's targeting these folks.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Greg.
Well, no. I was going to say that my kind of anecdotal experience, and I'm not a Facebook marketer, my vicarious experience at Uberall, and sort of hearing from others, was that people always sort of intellectually recognized Facebook was a great place to do B2B targeting, but from an execution standpoint, it was always challenging. LinkedIn was just sort of low-hanging fruit. You just had to pay the money, which everybody gripes about, but much more difficult to do that. It was a much more creative endeavor on Facebook, and I just think that this makes it a lot easier for folks.
Well, I think, and we, at least in our space, I don't know, I shouldn't speak for you guys, but I at least tend to think of digital marketing as a much more sort of, direct transactional flow where you're expecting a conversion after somebody is clicking on an ad. But in these larger B2B segments, I mean, these are years-long sales cycles in many cases where you need to target 15 to 30 decision makers. And so it's more of a brand building exercise in many cases where it truly is a display thing that you just need to be in front of people for a few months with the right messaging that's just going to sort of sit in their brains. And so from that standpoint, I think Facebook is as good, if not a better place to be than LinkedIn. And LinkedIn ads for these segments in particular have gotten just so expensive that I think there is an opportunity for Facebook here. I know there's a lot of money in this space, being involved in Demand Science. I mean, Demand Science has dozens, if not hundreds, of competitors. There's TechTarget and 6 Sense and a whole range of these other companies that are targeting this, that are all very, very well funded, very, very successful companies. So I think it's a way Facebook has sort of seen the growth in this space and probably wants to capture more of those dollars for themselves here. So,
well, it'll be interesting to see what the impact on some of these companies that you mentioned is. If this is really successful, you'll see a migration of money away from those other companies. And You know,
Potentially, or these other companies. I mean, we've said for years that, oh, it seems like agencies are going to get shoved to the side of the road by all these sort of automated changes that Google's making. It could be that,
yeah,
these companies are now the sort of agency of
intermediaries.
record for
Yeah.
exactly for some of these newer sort of targeting and creative features. So I did want to talk really quickly about the other what I saw as a sort of secondary piece of the announcement around new active businesses. So you've always been able to target, or at least I don't know, the last time I ran a Facebook campaign was probably 2018. But you could target admins of pages pretty effectively, pretty easily, using Facebook's targeting. So I don't know if that went away and this is Facebook bringing it back, but it seemed a strange line item to sort of include in an announcement that seemed to across the other segment being sort of enterprise IT stuff, where this might be really really useful for some of the SaaS folks who listen to this podcast, targeting new businesses who just created a Facebook page, for example.
Well, and I know from research and other experience that people try and target small businesses by vertical, by revenues, by headcount, all kinds of different criteria, and two often neglected uh, categories are new businesses and businesses that intend to grow, and those are the businesses that really are going to invest in new services and technology, and so this I think is a great opportunity for some of those SaaS companies to to get in front of some of these businesses that are probably inclined to spend some money. So I think it could be quite a successful thing, depending on
It
how it plays out.
it dovetails I've been following the Census Bureau's reports on new business formation. And for since COVID, new business formation has skyrocketed and stayed at a fairly high level, significantly higher than it was pre-COVID. And in that sense, this seems like a really astute move to me, that it's a big growth area. And like you said, Greg, these are the people that are, at least the ones that are functional businesses, are the ones that are likely to need a lot of this technology.
Well, so Mike, there's two categories, right, that the government tracks. There's one, I forget what they call them. One is like businesses that they think are more likely to kind of be real
Right.
businesses versus whatever the other alternative is, people who are having fantasies and I don't know what the two categories are, but they're handicapping them, and about 50% of the new businesses are those that they think are more viable
Right.
than others.
But it's still way up
Yeah, it's
from
still a very big number. I mean,
number, and it's growing.
I mean, it made me think. I've been in some of on the government websites, and I think in some cases where there's a licensing requirement or registration requirement, you can get a spreadsheet. You can download a spreadsheet of business data. It's like address, phone number. I mean, it's like a lead list pretty much. And there's nothing like that, I guess, comparable to that for new business formation. I mean, one might think that would be public information that you could access and build lead lists with, but I'm unaware if that's true. Do you know anything about that, Mike?
Don't
Yeah, I
see
think
it
you have to go on a state by state basis in many cases, and then even if you have a lead list, Greg, then there's a lot of work involved in order to serve them an ad on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah, cleaning it up, refining your verticals, and then serving them an ad on Facebook. So I think that, to your point, this is going to be a much easier, and in terms of time spent plus cost of marketing, I think that this is going to be a pretty good winner for Facebook here.
So two final points. Facebook says they've got 200 million businesses on the platform, which is obviously an international, global number.
which is a number similar to what I heard from Google internationally and globally.
It's just a round number that they pull out of their posterior. How many SMBs on the platform? 200 million. But yeah, so that's interesting. I mean, and two things that we've talked about before. Small businesses tend to favor Facebook over Google because it's easier on one level, and I'm forgetting the other point I was going to make. Oh well, senior moment, cognitive decline. # cognitive decline.
Summer Friday. It's all right.
Yeah. So, but anyway, it's very, very interesting. It didn't really get a lot of coverage. I mean, some of it may not be new. I think
That's what it felt like that. Maybe they've had a lot of this functionality previously, and it's just been sort of hard to configure, and that they're now making an effort to make it.
I think that's
easier. It's all sort of prepackaged.
I think
But it's
that's
still a very interesting announcement that Facebook sees the opportunity here. They've probably heard from their existing advertisers, we really want to be able to do this, this, and this, and they're at least making an effort to execute on that. So
right, and hopefully it'll give LinkedIn a run for their money, and there'll be some price pressure on LinkedIn, some competitive pressure. Yep. Okay, that brings us to the end of another exciting and fulfilling Near Memo. We'll be back next week, and have a good week. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.